Thank you for your interest in learning more about the Radiation Injury Treatment Network, RITN, or as we like to call it, RITN. In this short presentation, we will cover what and who RITN is, the concept of operations, and quickly review some resources that will help you in your RAD/NUC medical preparedness efforts. RITN was founded through a collaboration between the NMDP and the American Society for Transplantation and Cellular Therapy, with funding from the Office of Naval Research. ASTCT members are world leaders in marrow transplantation. The Office of Naval Research has supported the NMDP since 1990 with grants to improve outcomes from marrow transplants to ensure that sailors would be cared for if there was a reactor accident on a ship or submarine. The grant included the need to develop a contingency network. Efforts to develop what became RITN began in 2001 following the September 11th attacks. In 2005, the predecessor to the Department of Health and Human Services Administration for Strategic Preparedness and Response recognized the gap in specialized care for acute radiation syndrome patients and engaged RITN to establish a formal MOU to collaborate on the response to an IND, ultimately incorporating RITN into the National Disaster Medical System. RITN hospitals will provide supportive care up to and including marrow transplants if necessary. RITN hospitals are focused on the treatment of acute radiation syndrome. This is because marrow is the most sensitive organ to ionizing radiation. Marrow produces all types of human blood cells that are necessary for life. If left untreated, the patient will ultimately die if they receive a high enough dose of radiation. Bone marrow transplant teams care for patients with leukemias and other blood cancers. In preparation for a bone marrow transplant, these teams purposely irradiate the patient or give them chemotherapy to eliminate their marrow before infusing the donor marrow. These medical teams are treating patients with symptoms and complications just like acute radiation syndrome every day. Not all patients will require a transplant. The vast majority will only require intensive supportive care. RITN's concept of operations is different from most communities' preparedness efforts. The RITN CONOPS focuses on preparing for a distant incident. Hospitals in close proximity to the disaster will be overwhelmed, so it is the hospitals in surrounding communities and even further away that will step up to provide the definitive care those patients need. Our CONOPS scenario of an improvised nuclear device is quite dramatic, but this forces us to prepare for the unthinkable and the resulting medical surge, and it is in alignment with the national planning scenarios. Any incident that results in mass casualties with marotoxic injuries is RITN's focus. The most likely incident would be that of a detonation of an IND. This is based on the national planning scenarios that state a 10 kiloton improvised nuclear device may be used in the United States. Of note is that this is not a megaton device that can devastate entire cities. So it will not be the level of devastation that is generally thought of. And fallout will be a significant issue. Even though fallout will be a significant concern, fortunately, radioactive fallout dissipates quickly. If people get inside, and stay tuned, they can prevent receiving a severe dose of radiation. As seen in these three images, the dark purple area is the dangerous fallout zone. It shrinks down within 48 hours to inside the moderate damage zone where the majority of destruction will occur. As mentioned, not all patients will require a transplant. The vast majority will have trauma or trauma and radiation injuries, known as combined injuries. Combined injuries are much more severe due to the compounding effect of the two types of injuries. Since RITN centers are primarily cancer treatment hospitals, they will have to provide consultation to trauma centers while these patients are under their care. Ultimately, about 1/10 of the total casualties will be candidates for treatment at a RITN hospital. It's important to understand that distance will not prevent involvement in the response to an IND. RITN centers are not first responders or a local asset. If a RITN center is near a disaster site, it will be too busy handling the immediate surge to be preparing to receive additional radiation victims. That's why RITN centers plan to receive patients from the impacted area, receiving the casualties to accommodate the medical surge and chaos closer to the disaster. The movement of patients will be complicated. The National Disaster Medical System prepares for this process and will be the means of moving casualties during a catastrophic incident like an IND. The left half of this image is our interpretation of how patients would make their way into the National Disaster Medical System. The right half is a summary of how ARS patients would move through the system en route to definitive care, either ultimately in an inpatient or outpatient setting. Patients suffering from life-threatening injuries due to trauma should be the highest priority. It is important to understand that there is time with ARS patients. The red line depicts the blood counts for casualties with a life-threatening exposure of ionizing radiation. You can see here that the second dip, where the arrow is the last chance to help save them. This doesn't happen for almost 23 days. This doesn't mean that you want to wait that long to care for them. But during the heat of the moment, immediately following the disaster, this means you can focus on the casualties with trauma and come back to the ARS casualties later. That's it for the overview. The rest of these slides, we will focus on some resources to help you with your preparedness efforts. RITN has a long-standing MOU with the Administration for Strategic Preparedness and Response and is incorporated into many federal planning documents, as seen here. On our website, you can find most of the following resources, such as our Acute Radiation Syndrome Treatment Guidelines, our referral guidelines for hospitals that receive casualties that don't know that they have acute radiation syndrome. This provides specific guidance for when to reach out for a consultation for acute radiation syndrome. Cytokines are FDA approved for the treatment of acute radiation syndrome. We combine all the guidance into a pocket guide or a poster depending on what you want to download from our website to help guide your treatment of those patients. We have been conducting exercises since 2006, and all of our situation manuals are available on our website for you to use. We also have many self-guided web-based courses on our website, as well as instructor-led courses for training medical staff. And all of these are free to use. We have a YouTube channel with training videos and videos of our full-scale exercises that we have sponsored. And we've collaborated with the Radiation Emergency Assistance Center and Training Site, REACS, which is a Department of Energy asset that responds to radiological disasters. Through this partnership, for over 15 years, we have provided mobile training to most of our sites, as well as all of our resources that we've shown here are incorporated into their app. The Radiation Emergency Medical Management website is a fantastic resource for information from first responders to first receivers. We have collaborated with the development and update of adult and pediatric medical orders for acute radiation syndrome since 2007. Finally, some key takeaways. Don't forget, patients will be moved by MDMS. This is a distant response is our concept of operations, and distance will not prevent involvement. If you're in Chicago and the disaster happens in New York, you can guarantee that you will see a medical surge through the National Disaster Medical System. Maybe not immediately, but within a week or two, those patients will have to be moved to other centers for care. Cancer treatment centers mean that they're caring for acute radiation syndrome only. They don't have trauma capabilities, but they will consult with trauma or burn centers on combined injury care. And all of this is going to be a complex response. Dose estimates are not going to be clear, which is going to require daily blood counts to determine where the patient's dose is. And difficult decisions will have to be made on who to prioritize for those critical resources. Triage is going to be essential because of this. And those injuries are going to be complicated. As we mentioned, combined injuries of trauma and burn and radiation significantly decrease survivability. The limited medical countermeasures that are available will help, but there's likely not enough for everyone. Finally, low doses can be discharged with some guidance, and many of the moderate doses will be able to be treated outpatient with cytokines and daily blood counts. We wouldn't be where we are without our partners that have assisted in getting the word out about the importance of preparedness for mass casualty incidents from radiation and chemicals that cause neurotoxic injuries. We owe a debt of gratitude to all of them. Thank you for your time. Please go to ritn.net to learn more about us and reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.